mode.
Hello everyone, good morning and thank you for attending today's webinar. My name is Mike Wallabin and I'm the president of 4G360.com. 4G360 is one of the largest online communities out there for 4G professionals with over 10,000 members. As an active community, we offer a wide range of resources for 4G professionals like training, online training, research reports, job boards, networking opportunities. We also host webinars like today's great webinar on what is happening with WiMAX and the aviation industry. I'm pleased to be joined today on this webinar with today's presenter, Declan Byrne. Declan is currently the president of the WiMAX Forum. Declan joined the WiMAX Forum back in 2010 as a director of marketing and became president in early 2012. Declan has over 12 years experience in the wireless industry, having previously worked in leadership roles with Airspan and AT&T. Declan is currently leading the effort right now with other key members of the WiMAX Forum to help bring WiMAX technology to the aviation industry with the AeroMACS initiative. Declan will explain much more of this in detail over the next 30 to 45 minutes. We will have Q&A after the presentation. All attendees can ask questions by using the questions section of the GoToWebinar dashboard that should be on the right side of your screen. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll go ahead and turn this over to our presenter, Declan Byrne. Declan?
Thanks, Mike. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. It's a real pleasure to be working, Mike, with your organization again, and I hope this is one of many. You've got a great group of folks that you can help us kind of reach out to and around what are clearly interesting subjects, judging by the registration list and the attendee list. So today I want to take, as Mike mentioned, about 30 minutes. I've got about 15 slides, which I'm going to run through, sort of reground folks on where the WiMAX Forum is right now, sort of what our priorities are, commercially and technically, and then really dwell on industrial markets and specifically aviation, because it's a market segment that's of keen interest to us and it's really kind of taking off. And we're headed to a fairly large summit the week of September 10th, September 11th in DC. Kind of more on that later. So, WiMAX has been around for about 12 years as a technology. Its principal application, or its initial application, I guess I should say, was in wireless networks for service providers. Think Sprint, Clearwire, UQ Communications, and others. It is absolutely clear to us in the WiMAX sort of managers of the ecosystem, if you will, in the WiMAX Forum, that adoption of WiMAX, mobile WiMAX, into service provider networks has probably peaked, if it's not declining already. Certainly we continue to see growth in emerging markets like South Asia, the Middle East, indeed even in Japan. They're adding subscribers at a pace of about 1 million or 2 a year. So in certain markets, even on the service provider side, WiMAX continues to grow as a solution. Having said that, I think our future growth, we are convinced in the WiMAX Forum, will be on the vertical markets or industrial markets. And I really mean what you see on the page in front of you here, aviation, which is the focus of this seminar today. Oil and gas will be at OilCom in Houston. At the end of the year, that'll be a second visit or a third visit by us, and we generally have about 80 to 100 participants from the oil industry come together and talk about lessons learned in WiMAX. And smart grid, so the utility business. We have, as a forum, sort of reacting to the attraction in the industrial markets for using WiMAX as basically a private networking solution. We have set up an aviation working group and a smart energy working group. The aviation working group is principal focus, of course, is the aviation industry. And the term that industry has created to describe WiMAX as a next generation solution in the aviation community is AeroMACS. Their term, not ours, although it works rather well with WiMAX, we think. In terms of smart grid, smart energy, the term that we have created as a WiMAX ecosystem is WiGrid. So WiMAX in the smart grid. So here's a snapshot which is both forward-looking and backward-looking sort of activities in our ecosystem, if you will. And what this slide is attempting to communicate, and I think it does rather effectively, is that we have continued growth in emerging markets in Africa, in the Middle East, South Asia, as I mentioned, on the traditional mobile service provider wireless ISP space. But you will see highlighted in this chart as well quite a few, which may be new to you, industrial applications, and some of them of some scale in terms of utilities, aviation, oil and gas, etc. On the utility side, we have probably 20 to 30 utilities, very large investor-owned utilities as well as private utilities, smaller, more regional, rural utilities using WiMAX. Some of them all the way to the meter with embedded WiMAX silicon. So the plan in Japan, for example, is to do over a 10-year period about 6.5 to 7 million WiMAX embedded meters with Kyushu Electric Power Corporation. In Australia, there's almost 1 million meters with embedded WiMAX on 2.3 gigahertz, speaking to WiMAX base stations. So there is quite a bit of scale happening, and we're very excited about it in the utility business. And we are certifying Y-grid, quote-unquote, products, which are WiMAX products, and the profile, standardized WiMAX products, I should say, but the utility industry working with us has created sort of a profile which really speaks to their requirements, and we will be certifying from vendors such as GE and Cisco and RuggedCom and others, WiMAX Y-grid products later this year, probably October. In reaction to uptake on the utility and the industrial side and the aviation side, as well as a desire by our operator membership to really make WiMAX from their standpoint, to make WiMAX and the 3GPP TD-LTE communities closer married, we have developed what we think is a relevant and exciting roadmap, technical roadmap, and I'm really only going to focus on sort of 2013 on. The technology now covers over 1 billion POPs worldwide, and you will see on the right side of this chart, we're talking about WiMAX Advanced. It's release 1.1 and 2.1 and 2.2. Sorry, and 2.2 we expect to be finished with at the end of the year. And really, what 2.2 is it's a technical effort. And this is very important. It's a technical effort whereby spectrum-limited operators can refarm their currently used spectrum to introduce TD-LTE infrastructure and devices in a kind of a co-located, harmonized way with and while maintaining their WiMAX network. So we're developing that technical solution, which is quite graceful and elegant. We're developing that in reaction to requests from our operator community to be able to introduce TD-LTE alongside WiMAX. And so, indeed, the WiMAX Forum is cooperating very closely with the TD-LTE community, most specifically with the Global TD-LTE Initiative, GTI. And we were at their request. We joined them in Shanghai about 2 months ago, and we'll be going out to Tokyo in a couple of weeks for the 3.5 gig interest group meeting. So we're pretty excited about WiMAX Advanced Release 2.1, 2.2. We think it really speaks to what mobile operators want in terms of maintaining the relevance of WiMAX technology while interleaving and allowing TD-LTE, the introduction of TD-LTE into their networks. And importantly, and this was really our key consideration, it allows WiMAX operators the opportunity to maintain their WiMAX networks for as long as they need to. Okay. So I'm having a little trouble advancing the slide here, Mike. There we go. All right, so focusing a little bit on that technology piece that I was chatting about. We obviously, and presumably folks on the webinar will be familiar with, WiMAX sort of up to fixed, from fixed nomadic through to mobile, and advancing to what we were talking about really with what this WiMAX Advanced. And you'll see in that sort of purple oval on the bottom right, the vision for WiMAX Advanced, which is fully backwards compatible, but also allowing, as I've mentioned, what we call alternative radio access technologies, which is really a term of art for TD-LTE, the introduction of TD-LTE devices into current WiMAX networks. You see on this slide as well aviation with the AeroMACS tag, if you will, as well as smart grid with the WiGrid tag. We will be, as a forum, certifying products this year, as I mentioned, into the WiGrid smart grid space, and next year it's our intent to certify products into the AeroMACS aviation space. And as I mentioned, both of these communities have working groups established within our organization, which I'll get to in a moment. A final piece on what our effort is in terms of WiMAX Advanced. We are, as I mentioned, we're working very, very closely with 3GPP. We are explicitly referencing, rather than trying to recreate anything, we're explicitly referencing their specifications in terms of radio and network for WiMAX Advanced. Now, in terms of industrial markets, which is really the heart of this topic today, the role of the forum as managers of the ecosystem and evangelizers, if you will, of WiMAX is, we believe our role should be to define the requirements and technology profiles that industry wants, whether it be in aviation or utilities, and we have a method for doing that, and generally it's through a working group. We believe that we almost uniquely fill the role as a kind of a formal platform for interaction with the aviation industry, which is quite prescriptive. The aviation industry is very regulated, and it's very, inevitably you will deal with aviation authorities in countries, as well as sort of quasi-public entities, which are offshoots of whether FAA or Eurocontrol in the United States or in other authorities. They have technical requirements. They create these bodies, if you will, that will last for 2 to 5 years while they answer a technical question, and those bodies interact with the WiMAX Forum. And obviously we promote WiMAX technology. In terms of standardization around AeroMACS, we have been working with all of the bodies listed on this slide, and we've had to learn a whole new language. And I notice many of the folks that are on this call are already fluent in the language of aviation standards. But for us in the WiMAX ecosystem, and remember our background has traditionally been service provider networks, this has all been new language for us. And the aviation working group and our interactions with the aviation community have been going on for about 2.5 years now as we develop a profile in 5.1 gigahertz, more on that later, which really speaks to the requirements of this community. But I did want to sort of give a picture of sort of the interactions between our working groups, whether it's aviation, technical working group, or the certification working group, sort of the real 3 relevant groups, the sorts of products we produce in terms of PICs, protocol implementation conformance statements, and certification requirement statuses. It's the sorts of products we create, if you will, as a WiMAX forum and managers of a standard and profiles attached to a standard, and the interactions we have with that whole world, which I spoke to earlier in the aviation space, really RTCA, EuroCA, their associated organizations, Eurocontrol, both the FAA, the Japanese Civil Aviation Bureau with the International Civil Aviation Organization. There is quite a web, if you will, of aviation authorities with whom we have to interact and with whom we do interact very effectively and capably and frequently. All of the organizations listed on this chart will be attending our Aviation Summit, a 2-day event in September in DC. Many of them will be represented by very, very senior interlocutors. Now, when a standard or a profile, when it comes into the forum, I wanted to give, again, a chart sort of explaining to those who are new to the organization, new to what the WiMAX Forum does, sort of within, if you will, within the organization what we do. We have an aviation working group which develops the requirements of the aviation industry. The aviation working group is chaired by companies that are that have been long-standing suppliers to that industry, currently at Honeywell and Hitachi, for which I'm very grateful for their leadership. But we have companies like ITT, CETA, Celex, Rockwell Collins, Harris, etc., that participate, as well as the airlines themselves, both private and public, that participate in the aviation working group to develop requirements. Those requirements are then debated and voted on, and when they are approved, they are shared with the technical working group, which develops a system profile, as you can see from the slide, and the associated PICs, etc., and then works with the certification working group to develop certification profiles and tests that ultimately will be used by WiMAX Forum designated certification labs, because this certification requirement is critical to the aviation industry. And the certification that we perform is really a small part of what sort of the master certification, if you will, that this highly regulated industry will undertake. Part of what we also try to do as a WiMAX forum is be a platform whereby we connect traditional WiMAX suppliers, whether it be silicon or device or base station, into the aviation industry. And so you see a snapshot and a short list of companies from both of those ecosystems, if you will, on either side of this chart, and presumably the WiMAX forum is in the middle. Negotiating between the parties and really helping one speak to the other and excite the other to participate in the other's business opportunity. The benefits of collaboration are evident. The aviation industry spent years looking at available technologies and settled on WiMAX quite authoritatively about 2 or 3 years ago to be the future standard for surface communications at airports worldwide. And that's a done deal. That decision has been taken. We have been working now for the last 2 years, as I mentioned, with the aviation community to develop a profile of WiMAX, which is most fit for purpose, if you will, for the aviation community. In parallel to choosing WiMAX, the aviation community went to Geneva to the World Radio Congress, and they had 30 megahertz at 5.1 gigahertz allocated for their exclusive use for next generation surface communications. So critically, and this is very important for the suppliers, obviously, we have harmonized 5.1 gig international band available for this exclusive use. Additionally, the aviation community is very interested in using, however possible, what they call COTS, which is commercial off-the-shelf equipment, COTS. And so again, there is a ready market by the suppliers that have traditionally been members of my ecosystem in terms of whether they're base station device or silicon to serve the aviation community by delivering them what they've been making for years and years. Now there are some adjustments to the technology because remember this technology will be used to support ease and safety of flight, to mitigate runway incursion, to interpolate and extract reams literally of meteorological data, so highly sensitive, time sensitive as well as accuracy. So there will be requirements put upon WiMAX equipment, but what I can assure the suppliers on the call is that the aviation community is maximally working to really use what's in the truck, if you will, to use commercial off-the-shelf available equipment and to try not to make it, certainly not make it proprietary. The aviation community absolutely wants a standardized solution, but to certainly leverage what exists already. Now, in terms of why the aviation community selected WiMAX, we've listed a number of values, if you will, and this wasn't me generating this. This was the aviation community communicating to the WiMAX ecosystem on why they selected our technology. The aviation community is a very conservative community with a very, very long lead time and long support times for equipment. It costs literally an arm and a leg to pierce the fuselage of an aircraft. So any technology that will be introduced, whether it's an avionics or some other format, into the aviation system, if you will, has to be very robust, should not be bleeding edge, should be very stable, should be broadly deployed, and it should deliver what that community is requiring, which is a real-time, very high-quality, robust, wireless broadband connection, which WiMAX is delivering. Importantly, WiMAX is an all-IP solution. This is really kind of an IT. In many respects, if you will, this is an IT solution and a private networking, private enterprise solution that airports across the world will be implementing. And so WiMAX bringing with it no legacy telephone number, no SIM card requirement. That was a tremendous benefit to the aviation community. And then finally, the aviation community was very attracted to our long history of certification. Not only PKI in terms of mobile device certification, but also equipment certification, which the WiMAX Forum, through a network, if you will, of labs across the planet, has been running efficiently for many years. So I think those are many of the assets that the aviation community liked about WiMAX, and I certainly hope they're not disappointed in their choice. And that's a nice segue to the next slide. This business, if you will, is about to begin worldwide. Indeed, in the United States already there are half a dozen pilots of different size involving different players, NASA, FAA, airport authorities, as well as equipment manufacturers and builders of base station, builders of airport communications solutions. And this is the United States, and certainly in Europe as well. There are a number of projects. One I would highlight at Toulouse Airport involving major manufacturers like Indra and Airbus, but also involving, whether it be formal governmental organizations such as Eurocontrol, but also the next generation community that's kind of seized with this issue about implementing next generation communication solutions at airports. So this is not just a PowerPoint. Well, this is a PowerPoint presentation today, but this notion of AeroMACS across the world is picking up steam, as is evidenced by all of the pilots and all of the trials. And certainly, we're very pleased with the attendance, registration, and interest, and the agenda we've built for our first ever aviation summit, which you can see is going to be held in Crystal City in Washington, D.C., September 10 and 11. We have a two-day program involving a very, very senior keynote from the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, based in Montreal. We have participants from Japan, Canada, the United States, more broadly in Asia, and certainly across Europe. A number of aviation authorities are coming. The FAA will be broadly represented. And so, I mean, that's great on the industrial side in terms of authorities, if you will, and important. But we're also very, very pleased at the participation of a lot of the industrial players and actors within the aviation community. So I'm really thinking Thales, ITT, Harris, Honeywell, Hitachi, the list goes on. And so it's going to be a really, really great opportunity for, again, that traditional WiMAX community of base station manufacturers, device manufacturers, and silicon providers to communicate directly in a two-day group for networking purposes and also to answer a lot of questions, to communicate directly with the aviation community, both the official aviation community, but as well the manufacturing community that is behind this effort. And so, again, we have said, and the aviation community has told us, that they would expect the deployment, if you will, of AeroMACS, WiMAX infrastructure and devices at 5.1 gigahertz to proceed for the next 10 years. This is not a small business. The estimate that the aviation community arrived at for the U.S. aviation community alone, so this is something on the order of 2,000 airports of different sizes, was about 20,000 base station sectors and 1 million devices. And that may seem like a lot, and it is a lot, because you may be asking yourselves, well, there's only 20,000 aircraft flying in the United States airspace on any given day. But remember, AeroMACS is designed and intended to be the broadband solution, wireless broadband solution of choice across the full tarmac for all services. So there is the explicit air traffic control activity, which is, as we've talked about, preventing runway incursion, managing aircraft once they've landed, all of that activity. But there is the whole other part of what goes on in an airport and across an airport tarmac in airport operations. And so I'm explicitly thinking of baggage, maintenance, catering services, et cetera, et cetera. So when you contemplate an airport, a larger airport, particularly like an Atlanta or a Dulles or what have you, you can readily appreciate the number of tugs and baggage handling, trucks driving around as well as catering, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can see how this becomes a non-trivial amount of business for the manufacturing community. You can become to appreciate that very quickly, I would hope. And again, that's just the U.S. market sizing alone. We had not done this analysis for Europe and the rest of the world, but it's one we will do. So here's the sorts of subjects we'll be talking about. We'll have some leaders from Europe and the United States and Asia talking about the vision and strategy for airport systems in the 21st century. And really what they're talking about is a program which is much larger than AeroMACS. They're really talking about next generation communication solutions at airports and in airport systems in the 21st century. So that'll be a very, very interesting presentation, which is very much looking forward. Additionally, we'll have the managers of all the trials I spoke about on a panel talking about lessons learned, and challenges and successes and questions. We have device manufacturers as well as silicon providers on a panel talking about the availability of solutions. Spectrum is a key issue. It's allocated for exclusive use at 5.1 gigahertz. It's not clear yet how that spectrum will be allocated. Does the FAA in the United States control it? Does the FAA allocate that spectrum to airport authorities? This is very closely tied to the question of funding. It's my understanding that money is authorized but not appropriated. Who controls the purse? Will the FAA be making purchases, or will they be doing block grants to airports? I don't know the answers to any of these questions, but and I'm not clear that by September 10, 11, wise people who know the answers will be able to speak publicly about them. There are negotiations and details happening as I'm presenting to you on these very topics. But certainly these are questions we'll be asking. We'll be talking about networking and security requirements. Again, this is a highly regulated industry where safety of flight is critical. So the security of any network, particularly a commercial off-the-shelf network, is of high interest to regulators as well as deployers. And tied to that, we'll be talking about our certification plan for equipment and devices. And of course, there'll be a cocktail and plenty of opportunity for folks to network in a lovely setting in Crystal City. The event is free. You must simply register and show up. We'll offer you lunch on 2 days for participating. You can see we have a number of keynote speakers. We have sponsors, and supported by sort of the major authorities around the world. So we already have a pretty strong registration list. We're hoping that as a consequence of this webinar today and the questions you may ask, we generate some more interest, because we'd love to see you in DC for this important event. So Mike, that is my final slide. I hope I didn't speak too quickly, but I did want to sort of keep it down to a half an hour, and I really wanted to cover off, sort of for folks who weren't familiar with the WiMAX Forum, and I think as I was reading through the registration list, many of them were new to me in any event. I wanted to give a little background on the forum, our traditional business, industrial markets, and really focus on the aviation piece as we lead into the Aviation Summit. So hopefully that was what you wanted to hear. And
yeah, it sure was, Declan. And thanks again for giving us this great overview. What is happening with not just WiMAX, AeroMACS. What's going on in the aviation industry with the wireless broadband, I guess, technologies going there. We do have a lot of questions. I probably won't be able to get to everyone's question here. One thing you can do, if I don't ask your question, you can send the question later to info@4g360.com, an email, and I'll be glad to forward that on and hopefully get that answered for you. One question on a logistical side, is the slides, is this being recorded? And the answer is yes. I will have the recording up on 4G360 shortly after this presentation. We won't be able to hand out slides, but this whole thing will be recorded. One question that came a few times is, what about other technologies like LTE and super Wi-Fi? Is AeroMACS strictly now kind of going with WiMAX? Are they looking at other technologies right now?
Sure. So I think AeroMACS speaks specifically to the decision by the aviation community to use WiMAX technology, 802.16e, to solve a portion of the next generation communications challenge to create airport infrastructures and systems of the 21st century. So that's a long way, Mike, of saying that yes, there are other technologies. You know, we like to say in the operator business, smart operators understand and appreciate that they'd like to have a boatload of technical solutions in their quiver.
Sure.
And I think that would include WiMAX, TD-LTE, 3G technologies, Wi-Fi certainly, indeed fiber, and wireline technologies. I think if you consider an airport, yes, there are certainly Wi-Fi, certainly a lot of fiber, certainly WiMAX going in. I cannot comment tremendously on TD-LTE. I think the problem for aviation, if you think port authorities like Reagan or Baltimore Washington International, they don't traditionally have access to LTE suitable frequencies. And even though there are, 44 of them now, I believe, yeah. Those frequency sets are generally not available on terms that an airport authority can purchase. And I'm really thinking 700, 800, 900, 2.3, 2.5. So when these frequencies become available, generally private service providers bid them up and buy them. And so I think there is that challenge. The other issue is, what is clear to me is that airport authorities or the FAA, when they build these systems, it is absolutely their intent that these be private networks for security purposes and certification purposes. To the extent that an LTE network gets built, if it is not private, you're going to run into the issue of at some point the aviation authority or the port authority is going to have to do a deal with a Sprint or a Verizon or an AT&T. And given the uniqueness of what they're trying to offer in terms of air traffic control and the requirements, the security requirements they have, I'm not so sure that's a deal that will easily be done. But again, I think that's an issue we're going to discuss in DC, and I want to hear from the aviation community. But certainly we believe WiMAX has been, that community is solidly behind their selection of WiMAX.
Okay. What about I have a question here from one of our attendees. What are the advantages of using WiMAX in aviation instead of conventional methods being used today?
Yeah.
Why are they doing this? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, so we touched on a few of, again, I think the advantages as communicated to me by the aviation industry. And, let's do a little compare contrast, if you will, right? Wi-Fi is a wonderful technology. It is absolutely the most successful wireless technology to have ever been invented. It's in everything. Having said that, Wi-Fi is is an unlicensed solution. And when you have lots and lots of connectors onto a Wi-Fi network, you tend to experience congestion. And although Wi-Fi continues to advance, there's a robust ecosystem and great minds continue to improve Wi-Fi, there is that reality as compared to a licensed broadband wireless solution like a WiMAX. So Wi-Fi will have a role to play, a very large role to play, I think, in the aviation next generation communications requirement. But there are limitations to what that technology can offer. LTE, or the 3GPP technologies, there's a couple challenges there. I've already spoken to the spectrum issue, where a spectrum that is suitable for LTE is just not available on terms that, either it's not available full stop, or it's not available on economic terms that an aviation authority or a port authority can afford. The other issue is that LTE requires a SIM, a subscriber module, because that's the IP address, if you will, of an LTE node.
Sure.
An MS, a mobile subscriber, if you will. That is not an insurmountable challenge, but for CIOs and IT managers, having to manage SIM as well as IP addresses is another layer of complexity. And WiMAX as an all-IP solution is kind of natively attractive, if you will, to IT managers who are really going to be the managers of AeroMACS networks at airports. So WiMAX, again, has that kind of legacy attractiveness. So I think there's spectrum, there's cost, there's the issue that WiMAX has been around for 12 years now. It's well understood, the good and the bad, and the ecosystem is sufficiently robust within WiMAX to give comfort to aviation authorities as well as the new entrants to that market, whether it be Honeywell or Rockwell or Hitachi or what have you, that deals can be done for long-term supply of equipment.
Okay. I do have a few questions on the frequency, Declan.
Yeah.
It's 5.1 gigahertz in that range, right?
Well, I mean, that community calls it 5 gigahertz.
5 gigahertz.
I call it 5.1, but it's allocated for this exclusive use. I don't have memorized to heart, Mike. I apologize the exact band, but
Sure.
certainly others on the call probably know it. You may know it.
Well, the question really is in that frequency. I mean, what the RF propagation and these networks. I'm assuming this would be a mobile nomadic type of network.
Yes, and I know where the question's going.
Yeah.
Propagation will be poor, no question. Right? I mean, even at 3.5 gig, and there are probably 150 3.5 gig WiMAX networks across the world. Even at 3.5 gig, there are issues, certainly issues with line of sight, and absolutely issues with going indoors. So at 5.1, we would certainly not expect an improvement over 3.5. But there are advantages to the requirement space. Let's remember, this is a tarmac, which by its very definition is flat.
Yes.
Right? This is an open space. This is surface communications on the tarmac, so generally line of sight is available. So there are shading issues. There are one good thing apart from air traffic control tower, there aren't a whole lot of tall buildings around the surface space, if you will, of an airport.
Sure.
So certainly, and these are not massive spaces. Even if you think of an Atlanta, it is not, in terms of the square mile coverage requirement, if you will, of an Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, it's not a massive space as opposed to like Atlanta City proper. But so certainly there are challenges at 5.1, but there are advantages to operating in an airport space which somewhat mitigate those. And yes, it is a mobile system. That's right.
Okay. The timeline. When do you expect the first airport to be tested or go live?
Yeah. So there are a number. As I understand it, 2014 is the year in which I'm trying to find the right term of art here. Sort of quasi-commercial, semi-commercial activities commence in the U.S. and in Europe. I think there are half dozen airports, additional airports in the United States, apart from the ones I listed on that slide talking about trials, and there are 5 or 6 airports in Europe identified as well. There are some key questions which need to be answered. Certification. We need to develop and implement a certification program which the aviation community welcomes, and certainly we are focused on that. The issue of funding, and I mentioned how monies are made available under what sort of economic model, whether it's FAA buying equipment under master contracts or FAA distributing equipment. All of this is unknown, and certainly it's unknown in the U.S. and European context. So we need clarity from authorities on that. The good news is that there are no technical issues to proceeding. The technology, and we'll have great feedback at our summit from these trials.
Sure. The
technology is performing sort of as advertised. Spectrum is available. Technology is available in the spectrum band allocated. So the issues really are political and financial, which are often the most difficult.
Sometimes. A couple more questions, Declan. One of them is some people are asking, is this related at all with what's going on with FirstNet here in the U.S.? I don't think it is. Correct. This is completely separate.
I don't know what FirstNet is. That the public safety issue?
I think it's the public safety network.
So it is completely separate. As I understand, the public safety initiative at 700 megahertz, and you're right, the FCC has declaratively chosen LTE technology as its solution of choice there. This is a completely separate initiative.
Okay. Yeah, last question here. It's a business question. What was the TAM? That's the total available market for AeroMACS for both the U.S. and global, if you know. Tough question.
So I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to
okay.
that. I can tell you that the estimate in the United States market alone was something on the order of $6 to $8 billion.
Okay.
In terms of the equipment sale, and
looking at those volumes, you mean the volumes you mentioned earlier, probably.
So it's approximately 1 million devices and 20,000 base stations into the U.S. market alone, and that's over a 10-year period, and that translates roughly to about $6 to $8 billion, and that is equipment as sold by, when I did that math, that's equipment as sold by traditional WiMAX manufacturers when the buyer and the deployer is a service provider. Sure. Very competitive markets. My understanding is in the aviation space, because of the relatively lower volumes and because of all the security and the certification requirements, is that the prices in that community are much higher, which as passengers and aircraft we should all be grateful for. So yes, it's tens of millions of dollars certainly worldwide.
Great. Okay, Declan, thanks again. I want to thank you again and the forum for giving us this great overview. What's happening with WiMAX and the AeroMACS initiative or program. For all attendees, I want to mention again, the webinar has been recorded, and I'll actually will send out a link to your email very, very soon. So this will conclude our webinar for today. If you have questions, and there's a lot of them, I couldn't get to everyone, again, please send the questions to info@4G360.com. I'll try to forward them on so we can get some answers for you. Declan, thanks again.
Mike, it was our pleasure to do this, and we really hope as many of the folks who can make it come to D.C.
Yes.
And we'll certainly turn around. We'll certainly try to get these questions answered as quickly as possible.
Excellent. Thanks again, and hope everybody has a great day.
Take care. Thanks, Mike. Bye.